All right, and as we still remain there on the first year in office, as the country marks 1 year since President William Ruto took the reins of leadership, the research company InfoTrack has collected the opinions of the people about the performance of President William Ruto and his cabinet. The study highlights the opinion of Kenyans about the way the nation is run, the functioning of the government, the ministers who carry out their duties, and the ministries that seems to be providing services. Our reporter Mary Magdalene Nekesa highlights some of the hits and misses of 1 year in office by the head of state.
When President William Ruto took office 1 year ago, he inherited a number of major challenges, including corruption and the resulting economic disruption, a growing number of unemployed citizens, and an almost irreparable cost of living. Ruto promised on the campaign trail that he will fix all of this, rebuild the economy, and build a Kenya for all.
Mwaka huu tutaweka pesa ya serikali bilioni 50 kwa biashara ya mtu wa jini. Hapa kwa jua kali, hapo ndio tutajenga industrial revolution ya Kenya kupitia watu wa jua kali.
Kenya's fifth now marks his 1 year in office with a mixed record of achievements and the challenges. He came to power on September 13, 2023, after a bitterly fought election against former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. However, while he has fulfilled some of his promises, others have either failed or remained unfulfilled, and he now faces growing resistance from the opposition, to the point where Azimio la Umoja leaders are planning mass protest against what they called an illegitimate government.
By resorting to civil disobedience and protests, we can't be wrong unless the law itself is wrong.
On the cost of living,
Leo Kenya mzima inaongelelea mambo ya the cost of living. Kila mtu anasema gharama ya maisha imepanda, gharama ya chakula imeenda juu.
During his inaugural speech, President William Ruto emphasized the importance of addressing the cost of living by stating that the problems Kenya faces are related to production.
I am encouraging farmers going forward that let us use at least minimum 2 as we go to 3, because that is how we are going to increase our productivity, and that is how we are going to feed our nation, and that is how we are going to bring down the cost of living.
The president stated that the maize harvest forecast for the previous year was less than 30 million bags compared to the normal production of 40 million bags.
Whenever I go around the country, that many farmers are not yet using sufficient fertilizer. I am encouraging farmers going forward that let us use at least minimum 2 as we go to 3.
He stated that in order to address this, the government will bring subsidized fertilizer with the price drop from 6,500 Kenya shillings per 50 kg bag to 3,500 Kenya shillings per bag.
On this leg, we shall begin to immediately bring down the price of fertilizer from 3,500 to 2,500 per 50 kilogram bag beginning yesterday. And I'm told that yesterday alone, 34,000 bags of subsidized fertilizer was sold to our farmers.
In his first week in office, he distributed an initial of 1.4 million bags.
We are providing farmers with fertilizer whose formulation is customized to feed crops with their specific requirements of elements and address local soil nutrient composition.
Even though prices of some items such as flour and fuel have fallen slightly, the majority of Kenyans are still facing a cash crunch due to the lack of jobs, exacerbating their situation. President Ruto pledged to establish a government fund that will allow Kenyans to access money through their mobile phones. The government then allocated 50 billion Kenya shillings as the Hustler Fund initial capital.
Without a doubt, the Hustler Fund has been more than transformational. In fact, it is revolutionary.
Since then, the president has launched 2 Hustlers Fund products, a personal loan and a micro loan, with the goal of providing cheap credit to segments of society that he said had been neglected for far too long. The Hustlers Fund provides loan to businesses at the lowest annual interest rate in Kenya, 8%. The government has since stated that the response has been positive and promised that more products are on the pipeline. The head of state also promised to have over 4 million Kenyans removed from the CRB.
I am happy Governor has told me they are having engagement with the CRBs so that we can change the credit listing mechanism.
Following his directive to the Central Bank of Kenya, institutions such as Safaricom and KCB took the measures to have defaulters taken out of the blacklist.
Instead of blacklisting, we can have a graduated mechanism that allocates rating on every citizen that is borrowing in the manner in which they have borrowed and in the manner in which they have paid back.
Cut on borrowing and cut government spending by 300 billion Kenya shillings, President William Ruto's administration is still on a borrowing bench despite having pinned its campaigns on the Jubilee administration's high affinity for loans.
We are now doing what we should have done 15 years ago in the space of savings. And I'm very proud that I can now tell you that the money we saved in NSSF, and Raymond would know, is about 350 billion shillings in the last 60 years. But because of the new formula that we have agreed and we have begun implementing the last 4 months,
the Treasury contacted 4 foreign banks to set up a 76.8 billion Kenya shillings syndicate loan to close the 2022-2023 budget deficit.
We are going to double that money, the 350 billion. We are going to double that money in 4 short years.
According to a report by the Central Bank of Kenya for September, October and November, the Kenya Kwanza government took out loans totaling more than 137 billion Kenya shillings during the first 3 months in office.
And in a very short while, maybe 10-15 years, we would not need to borrow from elsewhere. We can borrow our own money as Kenyans.
By June of this year, Kenya was anticipated to get 129 billion Kenya shilling loan from the World Bank. Despite report alleging that the government failed to meet the 300 billion Kenya shilling spending budget cut target, the Treasury explained on February 3, 2023 that emergencies like persistent drought and financing of the CBC curriculum for public schools caused additional expenditure outside the budgeted items. Rationalization of these expenditures would have created a fiscal deficit of over 8% of GDP. However, with 300 billion Kenya shillings budget cut, the fiscal deficit for financial year 2022-2023 dropped from 6.2% of GDP to 5.7%. The National Treasury asserted that the government's intent to cut spending 300 billion Kenya shillings has been achieved and will be sustained until the end of the fiscal year as part of the bottom-up economic transformation agenda.
Vile niliwaambia wa Kenya, tutakomesha mambo ya kukopa bila mpango. Wengine wanajaribu kusema serikali yetu imekopa. Mimi nataka niwaambie, ile budget tulikuwa naye, kulikuwa na pesa ya kukopwa karibu shilingi bilioni 900. Wakati nimefika nikawaambia hatuwezi kukopa bilioni 900. Tupunguze.
Dealing with banditry, the Kerio Valley residents of Elgeyo Marakwet and other impacted countries, including West Pokot, Baringo, Laikipia, Turkana and Samburu, have endured decades of unimaginable hardship brought on by banditry, which resulted in numerous fatalities and injuries.
Vile wameama distance ya almost 50 km kuanzia mahali walikuwa naishi, wakienda na bado tukienda tusiposaidiwa na serikali. Unaona hata watoto wadogo shule yetu hakuna.
Tough talking President William Ruto continuously reaffirmed his government's commitment to combating banditry and said that it will use innovative methods to do so. Additionally, in his most recent press conference, Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki sounded warnings to bandits once more and stated they were beginning to see result as more than 140 guns had been turned in.
The gorges, ravines, caves, hills, and the escarpments that bandits were using to hide have been completely cleared of, and all threats have been removed, and we have dominated those spaces to ensure that bandits do not return there ever and ever again.
Despite this, communities in impacted areas continued to voice complaints as death toll rises.
The Kenya Defence Forces, the National Police Service are working together seamlessly and supporting one another to make sure that this operation succeeds.
On committing to the 2/3 gender rule, on the topic of gender parity, Ruto stated during his inaugural speech that he was committed to the 2/3 gender rule as stated in the Constitution and that he will work with Parliament to expedite many legislative initiatives and create a framework to quickly address the issue. In the run-up to the August elections, Ruto signed a charter with women at Nyayo Stadium in June promising them 50% of his cabinet. Ruto, however, failed to line up his election campaign promises as only 7 women were named to his cabinet, falling short of 4.
I could have done better. But you know, as I told you, politics is about balancing many things. You're balancing regions, you're balancing age, you're balancing this, that, the other. And you know, there was even a very interesting scenario. One of the female governors called me and told me that please make so-and-so PS. And of course, he was pushing for a male person. So I told her, Governor, I already have problems, you know, with the women. Instead of you pushing me to appoint more men, you should be pushing me to appoint some more women. So that is why, part of the reason why I have appointed a gender advisor in my office, because I intend to pursue this thing beyond the appointments I have made in cabinet and in PSS.
For Maisha Prime, Maisha Television, my name is Mary Magdalene Nekesa.